I'm Kelly Dolen. I'm a writer, director, producer. I've just done the feature film John Doe, Vigilante by my wonderfully cliched biker scout here in the background. I saw Star Wars when I was 7 and decided that that was what I wanted to do, get into the film industry. And I started out doing acting for many years, and then for a long while after seeing the process of acting, I thought, well, that's only such a small amount of the whole thing. So I decided that I wanted to get into writing and directing. So in about '95, I started down that path and done 3 feature films, short films, documentaries, music video clips, you kind of name it, I've done it. From a total standpoint of why do you go to the movies, for the entertainment factor, I'd say Raiders of the Lost Ark. I say that's like the perfect movie for popcorn fun. It's perfect structure, perfect everything. But, for recently, I would probably say something more like Seven. David Fincher, I really like his stuff. So, there's more of a dark tone to it, but I also love things that have got a bit of a twist to it as well. So I like movies where you're not just going in and, turning your brain off. You actually have to think a little bit, and then all of a sudden there's a fantastic reveal at the end and you go, whoa, I got hoodwinked. That wasn't what I thought this film was going to be. So that's when I really kind of spark up and really get excited and inspired. I'd love to be making movies like Star Wars and Raiders and Jaws and all of those sorts of movies that I grew up on. But in Australia, you're very limited with the resources and the money specifically. I mean, everything comes down to money, whether we like it or not. I mean, we've definitely got the ability and the talent to do it here, but the resources financially wise is a different story. So I don't really know why I've ended up going down more of the darker path. I suppose it's easier to write for me. I've always come up with these stories. I mean, I wrote John Doe in '96 originally, and it was straight after the Port Arthur massacre, and that really interested me because the next day his photo was all over the news and in the papers and everything, and everybody said, oh, you could see it in his eyes, you knew that he was a nutcase. And I just thought, you know what, the day before he did it, he was the same as you or I. He was just another guy. And I thought, wouldn't it be fascinating to make a movie from the killer's perspective? But then also, as time evolved and the idea evolved, well, what if we took all emotion out of it and just made it logical? Yeah. Because, as you grow older, you watch all of our society change, and particularly after 9/11, we've all become so, politically correct and sensitive and all of this sort of thing. And so it's interesting to see how what was once black and white as a kid now becomes, shaded by so many different things as you grow, different sensibilities as you grow older. So, that came into it. And then John Doe was sitting there for a long time and we didn't do anything with it until I met Steve Coates, the writer. And then I kind of handed over what I had with him, and then he and I sat down and we collaborated, and he just took it to a whole different level. It was like, okay, well, what about, half the stuff that you're rabbiting on about? Well, why don't we put in media manipulation and this and this and this? And then what we did was we were gathering a whole bunch of real life stories that were going on, that we were reading on the internet and in the papers and everything, and then we kind of interwove them into the story as well to give it a real basis in reality, and which I think clearly works, because people either love the film or they hate it, and the ones that hate it just say it's just too close to home. I mean, we've had people say that it's like a snuff movie, and then other people come out and say it's like a documentary, and then other people say it's like an action film and it's like a horror film, and it's kind of like, it's not like any of that. It's kind of got all of these elements, but it's just that it's maybe too close to home for some people. The structure of the film kind of came together really from 2 elements, I think. One was, three. First and foremost, we knew the story that we wanted to tell, so it almost kind of pushed you in a certain direction with how the filmic structure needed to be. And then 2 movies that really got to me was District 9, how that started off with that documentary style and it kind of went into a film after it. So that worked, and it worked really well, and I thought, well, that's really interesting, we can kind of do something similar with that. So every camera that's in the movie, in John Doe, I had to think, why would that camera exist within the world of John Doe?
CCTV or live,
Yeah.
your report, like
Yeah.
it's in the car getting pulled over.
Yeah, exactly. He's even filming himself, so he's recording his events to put online so people can form their own judgment. Even when there's a scene where he records, because he's a social worker essentially, and he records one of his clients, and even Jamie Bamber, the actor, was like, well, why would he be doing this? You know, every other camera you've justified. And I said, I'm still justifying it in here. He's got it hidden in the little pop plant over here so that people can see how he is as a normal man before he starts doing all this heinous stuff, and how his mind has slowly been changed even by his surroundings, you know. And so every camera had to be structured like that. The other thing that inspired me was I saw this documentary on 9/11 called In Memoriam, and it was one-on-one with Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, talking about his experiences at 9/11. And, you know, it was heartbreaking to watch, but also the structure allowed you to really get sucked into everything. I mean, knowing it was factual, but the way, because they'd start on him and then they'd cut to the real footage of what actually happened, and then they'd come back to him, or they'd go to his advisors or everybody that was around him for that whole day. Because if you don't know the story behind that, he was actually down there at ground zero. You know, he loves New York. He was so passionate about it and everything, and he could have been killed that day. So it was that combined with District 9, and obviously, as I said, you know, David Fincher. So, you know, normally with a documentary style, you'd shoot it in 16:9, or even back in the day 4:3, you know, so it'd have that square TV look. But this is where I kind of cross that line, is that I love the 2:3:5 aspect ratio. It's just got this epic feel about it. So I kind of pushed it a little bit there just to kind of give it a more cinematic feel by shooting it in that ratio. I wanted to make John Doe Vigilante for a lot of reasons. I think that at a private level, everybody's talking about the issues that are going on that we're reading every day in the papers and seeing on the news, and being very vocal about it. So if I come to your house and we sit down and the cameras aren't recording, we sit down and we talk about this, and people get very passionate about it. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have that at a public level? And what better way to do it than in a movie? So to me, the movie really is a social commentary. I wouldn't call it a standard form of entertainment. It's not a movie that you go to. My analogy of movies is that you go to them, you switch your brain off, they give you a bit of a cuddle, and on the way out they pat you on the back and they say, hope you enjoyed the experience. This movie doesn't do this. This movie grabs you by the collar as soon as you walk in and it yells at you for an hour and a half. And I think that's kind of the only way that you can get people to listen these days, because we're so bombarded with information from every second of every day. I mean, we could be sitting here having this conversation now, and right at this second, you could still be on your phone texting while doing this. And I mean, even, you know, my kids, I look at the kids and they can be doing 6 things at once, and it's just, you know, it's coming from everywhere. So the only way that anybody listens these days is when something, you know, quite extreme happens. So I didn't want to shy away from that, and I think, you know, that was, you know, what the movie kind of had to be to make people stand up and say, okay, we'll give it a minute. What's really interesting is that as you grow up in the industry, you always hear people talk about find a point of difference. What's your point of difference? And we thought we had that with John Doe. I mean, if there's a point of difference, my God, you know, I haven't seen a film like that. I haven't seen a film that gets you so emotionally fired up for a long, long time. And in fact, Daniel Scharf, who produced Romper Stomper, was on board very early on, and he read the script and loved it. And he said, whatever you do, don't soft cock it. Make sure you make this as hard as the script is. And we said, well, yeah. And he saw it and he loved it. And he, you know, I mean, I think the Australian distributors used his quote on it, you know, the most controversial film since Romper Stomper. But the downside of being the point of difference is that I've subsequently learned is that Hollywood and distributors and sales agents are not interested in point of difference at all. They don't care about talent. They don't care about anything other than A, B, C and a mathematical equation. So path to least resistance is their whole MO. If you come in and you've got an action film and it fits their little criteria, bang, done. Romantic comedy, bang. Horror, bang. But the second it's outside of that, I mean, we had one distributor in particular, the owner saw the film and loved it. lost his marbles on it. Said, yep, we're going to do this. Sends it to his marketing team, and they go, oh, how the hell are we supposed to sell this thing? And it's like, we're sitting there thinking, man, you know, all you got to do is put that mask up. That was the original poster, was a mask.
Yeah.
I'd be looking at it going, what the hell is this all about? And the original title was John Doe, which is probably why I keep calling it John Doe. It was never John Doe Vigilante, but in all their wisdom, they wanted to put it out as John Doe Vigilante. But to me, there's no mystery. John Doe, who is John Doe? John Doe is watching. You are John Doe. We are John Doe.
Yeah.
That's marketing. And we will be going, what? Oh, I'm not John Doe. What are you bloody... You know what I mean? That's what gravitates people to it. Yeah. There's an African-American kid in I think it's Southern America, that is so indignant about the shootings of those other kids by the police that he has memorised the end monologue from John Doe and manipulated it a little bit to incorporate the problems that they're having there. Yeah. And then he's recorded a 3-minute monologue. He's not an actor, this guy. Recorded the 3-minute monologue and put it up on YouTube. Now, what Australian film's ever done that?
Yeah.
I don't think anything. You know, that's the power of it, is that it affects people at a really deep, visceral level. I mean, I teach acting, and one of my students, she's gone through hell in her life, and she's only 18, and she came and saw it, and I remember at the end of it, she was standing there looking at me, and I thought, oh man, you know, it's messed her up. And she, and I went down, and she just grabbed me, and she was hugging me and trembling, and I pulled her back, and I said, are you all right? And she just looked at me and she said, thank you. Mate, I mean, how many movies have got the power to do that, you know? Yeah. It had some sort of cathartic effect on her. So, I don't know, you know, we just tried to put the right elements in place, and, you know, you get that sort of reaction. But then, you know, you get alternatively, I've had people come out and abuse me at the end of it and saying it's an evil movie, and that it's going to cause copycat killers, and it's, you know, going to cause riots, and you know, it's like anything, man, you can't win. Some people hate Titanic, some people hate Avatar, but if I was James Cameron, I'd be laughing all the way to the bank. Stephen Coates and I met in late 2008. My last film, The Gates of Hell, premiered at a festival here in Melbourne, and his business partner at the time saw it and approached me to direct a film that they had going. And then Steve came to my place and watched Gates, and then straight away we just hit it off. And then we looked at what he had in his kit, because we wanted to work together, and we looked at what I had, and there was one script that we had, and we showed it to Michael Reimer, who did Battlestar Galactica, who's kind of a friend and a mentor, I would say. And he read it and he said, look, it's a good idea, but you know, it's not particularly well executed. And he said, I'm going to give you 2 words of advice, what my mentor gave me in LA, you know, 25 years ago. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, astonish me. And I said, well, what does that mean? I said, does the film need to astonish me or what? And he said, no, every scene needs to astonish me. And I went, bloody hell, okay. My head just kind of exploded at that point, and I walked away, and I told Steve, and I said, have we got anything that has the power to do that in every scene? And at that stage, John Doe was called The Message, and it was really only an outline. It was a short that I'd written with a whole bunch of notes around it, so it wasn't even fleshed out as a feature. And we kept coming back to this thing, but obviously we knew that it needed a hell of a lot more, and that's when, you know, as I said, because I wrote it in '96 originally, and then, you know, since 9/11 and media manipulation and the internet and blah, 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 all these other things came into play, that's when we sat down and said, right, let's do it. So we just nutted this thing out, and the rest is history. My process to writing is a struggle. So I would say that I come up with ideas really well. That's my strength. But my weakness is actually the discipline to sit down and write. And if I have to, then I kind of get annoyed and the best doesn't flow. And that's why it's so good with Steve, because he's the exact opposite in that he can sit down and bam, he can just crank it. He's unbelievable. He's so quick, he's so insane. Like, he can crank out 30 pages in a day. If he gets going, it's just amazing to watch. I mean, I've never worked or seen anybody that cranks them out as quick as he does. And he doesn't crank them out crap either. He's got a real quality to what he does. So, yeah, for me, it's a real struggle. The other thing too is I know that probably my weakness is the dialogue. So again, I like the ideas. I love coming up with the ideas, and then I'll write it, and the dialogue, when I put it in there, when I'm writing solely, is just there to facilitate it, to get it through. And that's when I kind of hand it over to Steve and say, well, I mean, we're working on our next film at the moment, and the same thing happened there. I think I'd written about 40 pages of it. And I said, there you go. And then we sit down, and then he breaks it down, and then he says, okay, well, where can we take it? The film did change quite dramatically, I would say. It's definitely not the cut that I would have had if I was given free rein. I would definitely do things differently. But saying that, it's interesting because I heard Steven Spielberg say this once many years ago, is that you never know how to make a film until you finish that particular film, because every film comes with its own set of problems and its own issues that you've got to deal with and you know, basically conquer the whole way along. So it evolved for many different reasons. And one of the things I think that I learnt with John Doe is that when we finished the script, we shopped it around here and in Hollywood, and everybody was really enamoured by it because it was so powerful and it was such a page turner. But then what sits on the page really well sometimes doesn't translate perfectly well to the screen, particularly for entertainment-wise. Because even as much of a mockumentary social commentary that John Doe is, it still has to entertain and it still has to keep you engaged. So, I haven't let this one out of the bag, but I will. We had a real issue with post-production in that we did our first cut and it was pretty much verbatim to what was on the script. But the first act was like watching paint dry. And we all went, holy crap, where did all the magic go? So I pretty much had to go, the only thing that really didn't change was the third act. The third act is exactly as it is. But the first two acts I kind of had to go in chronologically and just rip it all apart and say, okay, well, why, how do we get this to this, and bang, 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 bang. So that was an eye-opener, but also a real annoyance because I think we lost a lot of nice little things in there by having to do it that way. But the catch-22 is that if we hadn't have done it that way, it wouldn't have worked as well as it did. So, you know, it's the first time that I've had that challenge. On my other stuff, you know, there's your story. It's pretty easy, it's straightforward. But because of the construct of this film being so unique and different, yeah, I mean, I had to learn on the go, you know. I mean, the pre-production was fantastic. The shoot was off the planet, and everybody felt good and it felt right. And at the wrap party, you know, our editor had cut this amazing trailer and we were all jazzed and fired up. So it really only kind of started to change in post-production, and that's where we were able to accept the challenges that lay ahead. It was always the basic backbone skeleton of the film is exactly as it was, and it always was that, and it always started the way that it did. It was just that there was a shuffling of scenes to make things flow a little bit more kinetically from the next to the next to the next, while not confusing people. Because that's what the key was. I think that when we did that first cut, it felt like, and I think the film probably suffers from it still to this day, is there's so much information. And you really, to get the most out of it, you've got to see it a second time. And then you go, oh wow, that was there, that was there, that was there, that was there. And it's so layered, it's so complex, there's so many things going on, there's so much subtext going on even between the actors. I mean, you think about it, you've seen it, so you're out the other end. Does John know about Ken? Does Ken know or suspect that John knows about him? And just by that power play, you watch it again a second time and then you see the actors playing all that out just in their eyes, and you're like, wow, that's really cool that they've even taken it to that level. So it was just, as I said, it was a really different journey, this one, which is why the next film's going to be by the numbers. stock standard down the track,
Yeah.
3-act structure, here it is.
Yeah.
So basically what we did with the script as soon as we had it ready to go was, you know, we started attaching people within the industry that we knew that were quality people. And the reality is you can get to anybody, you know, at any level. Essentially it comes down to going through the process, and unfortunately that's the reality of filmmaking, is there's just a stock standard process. If you want a producer, you get on the phone. I mean, we wanted David Lightfoot, who did Wolf Creek. I mean, he's done heaps more than that, but you know, that was his biggest claim to fame at that stage in his career, and we rang him and said, would you be interested in this? Sure, send me the script. He reads the script, he likes it, he gets on board. So, you know, there's a pretty boring structure that has to go into play if you're going down that path. But the other thing, the way that most people do it now is they write a script, they'll send it into Screen Australia or to Film Victoria to get funding, development funding, and if they do get development funding, that it means that that organisation is pretty much going to support them and back them the whole way, and then they will help you get out to the right people that you need to know anyway. Alternatively, I mean, the future's here now, and the world is changing a lot, and those kind of sensibilities are pretty much archaic. And why I'm saying that is that, get on the internet. How many people now are making their careers and not giving two shits about anybody else? Freddie Wong. Mate, let's unfortunately look at him as the cliche. If he walked into Hollywood, nobody would have touched him. He's the cliched little Asian kid, fat, not attractive in any way, shape or form, and I'm just putting it as it is. This is what they want. They want the Brad Pitt. They want the next action hero. So you know what he does? He says, you know what, stick that up your bum. I'm going to go out and do these short films and put them up on the net with my mate. They're so good, all of a sudden, Hollywood's a bunch of sheep. This kid's off the planet. They go after him, and he's just signed a $60 million deal with Lionsgate a couple of months ago for some TV show or something. You've got him, you've got FPS Russia, another young kid in America who puts on this funny Russian accent and shoots guns every week. And now you've got video game companies coming to him saying, can you promote Call of Duty? Can you promote Hitman? Why? Because people want to see them. You've got a girl in, I think she's LA, Gemma Marbles. She just gets up there and she rants on her phone every week. Mate, it's unlimited now how you can get your films up and going. There's a guy in Melbourne, fantastic filmmaker, young guy, called Michael Shank. He's got his own YouTube channel and he does these amazing shorts. The technology, all you got to do, the technology in that is more than what we had 20 years ago when they made Jurassic Park. In 1993, that's got more computing power and what we all have at our hands. So it's a matter of you getting off your ass and saying, you know what, I'm going to learn it myself and do it myself. And I wouldn't worry about the system. If what you've got's good enough, then they will come to you. Follow your own bloody instincts. Don't worry about it. Because the problem is that, and I've got lots of filmmaker mates, we're all in that same boat, in that when you go through the system, you've got to jump through all these hoops. And let's say you walk into a room with an executive in Hollywood and he said, I love you, this is fantastic. Well, has he got the power to hit the green light and give you the money? No. And everything's relative. I've got a friend of mine, director, who is off the planet talented, and he can make $5 look like $5 million. And he just recently did a short that, when I first watched it, it was a little teaser thing that they did to show the studios what they wanted to do for the feature. Now, he shot it in a weekend and he did it on no budget. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, he's used stock footage and he's incorporated a couple of his actors. And then I spoke to him about the process, about how he did it, and he did the whole thing himself. And my jaw literally dislocated and fell on the ground, and I was like, what? Anyway, he presented all of this to Hollywood. It was only going to be a $5 million budget. Didn't get going. Now, how can that possibly not get going? It's a guarantee. The genre was perfect. The filmmaking execution was perfect. Everything was there. But what it means is that he gets validation from somebody at some level, but there's about 50 other levels above. So what I've always done is I've gone out and raised the money independently. So John Doe, we raised the money totally independent. Same with The Gates of Hell, same with Rain in Darkness. Now, the difference is Rain in Darkness was $49,000. The Gates of Hell was $1.1 million and John Doe was $3 million. So clearly, you know, as you get older, your network gets bigger, you know, start, and obviously as well, putting the right people around you, you're able to build better products each time. And, you know, if I compare Rain in Darkness, which I'd laugh at now, but that was all I could do with that level of resources and skill I had at that stage in my life versus now, it's a whole different ballgame. So, yeah, the only person that's going to hold you back from making your career happen is you. The DOP obviously is integral to the whole look of the film. And I was lucky that David Parker, who produced The Gates of Hell, my last film, and he and I have been collaborating now for 14 years. So again, a friend and a mentor, and he's done 44 films. You know, he's an iconic Australian producer, director in his own right, writer and director of photography. But he's always done very standard fare as far as, you know, the shots and the lighting and everything. And when I told him about John Doe, I said, you know, I want to kind of give it that David Fincher 7 feel, girl with the dragon tattoo, that sort of a thing. And he got really excited because he said, I've never been able to be let off the leash. So for him, it was a real joy to see how far we could push everything. But also within the budget. I mean, that's the other thing too, is that, you know, our budget wasn't as free rein as what Fincher has with his. And, you know, Parker just did an amazing job. I mean, that's what he does. He lives, eats and breathes it, and he's been doing it since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. So, yeah, you get on the same page. The thing that he and I have got as well is there's a 14-year relationship there. So you kind of already know he knew what I wanted. I'm a bit of a...
What, for your personality or just for yourself in general?
Yeah,
you know,
but also that friendship, you know, he knows what inspires me. But then saying that, and you know, every shot we'd be on set and he'd be like, well, right, what do we want next? So I'd be sitting there with the director's viewfinder. I didn't storyboard John Doe. I just kind of went with the flow. Normally I'm very much storyboarding or previews or whatever, but because it was a drama and because I was limited with where the cameras could go, because as I said, they needed to be based within the world of what was going on, I really needed to be on set and feel it. There were certain scenes that I knew that I had to do in a specific sense. Anything where that was more action orientated or had a lot of CG, we had to do previews on. But generally speaking, I would kind of get there and I'd walk around the set and feel it, or, you know, the location, and say, okay, well, I think, you know, we should set it up here, and then I'd discuss it with him, you know, yep, we can do this, yeah, we'll do that, the lighting will work well here, you know, whatever it be. So I think a lot of it came down to the fact that we had that previous relationship for so long. We shot the film all around Melbourne, primarily because I'm from Melbourne and the bulk of the crew were from Melbourne, so we knew what we could get. And, you know, having a specific visual style that I wanted to get across, I knew intimately Melbourne. We did at one stage think about doing it in South Australia and in Sydney, but it would have presented a lot more hurdles to jump. So there's certain things within the process of filmmaking that you will take the path of least resistance because there's so many other hurdles that you've got to get over. So yeah, it was all around Melbourne and not meant to look like Melbourne though. I mean, we did shoot a scene in at Federation Square that ended up being so iconically Melbourne that we ended up having to cut it. Not that it was a bad scene, more that it was just, I didn't want people to go, oh, that's Melbourne. I mean, we even used Parliament House as our courthouse.
Yeah, you couldn't.
You know, and it was because I wanted that cliched, okay, well, everybody knows that's what a courthouse looks like. They wouldn't know that that's Parliament House. And, you know, the reality is Australia's 3% of the world market as far as, you know, the film goes. So what's the point in waving the Melbourne flag? You know, wasn't worth it. It was just, okay, we just need somewhere nice and easy to shoot. We shot John Doe with the Red Epic primarily. I think we used the MX as well a little bit. We used the Red Epic was the main camera, but we also used DSLRs, we even used iPhones, we used everything. So it was dependent on what it was that we were trying to portray. But yeah, primarily it was the Red. Directing actors is a very interesting process, and it varies greatly from director to director. My process is that I started out in acting years ago, and therefore I kind of knew what they needed. All actors, generally speaking, want to know that they're in good hands. They don't want to be made a fool of, and they want to know that they're safe and secure with you. So having that dialogue of being on the other side of the camera really helps, I think. And sometimes when you talk to actors, you can't quite verbalise what it is that you're trying to get them to do or where to go or whatever it is. So, you know, I'd even find myself kind of doing a rough outline of an acting and they go, oh, bingo. So then they can see it and it becomes really easy. But generally speaking, I think that half of the process of directing actors is casting well. If you cast well, the actors will do the rest of the work, essentially, just with your massaging and guidance based on, you know, rehearsals and so forth. A perfect example of that is Lockie Hume. I mean, from my perspective, he's probably the best Australian actor that we have that hasn't cracked it overseas. Now, why he hasn't cracked it, I have no idea. I mean, he's off the planet. Now, he would come in every day and pretty much challenge me with the script and say, well, they wouldn't say it this way, they wouldn't say it that way, they wouldn't say it that way. Now, this is in a good way. I'm not saying this in a bad way. I'm saying that he's so learned and he takes it so seriously and he does the backstory and he gets right into it that he comes in and he says no. And so he was fantastic in that sense. The only time that would vary is sometimes you needed to have specific lines in there to get, you know, certain things that we were foreshadowing or whatever. So that was the only times that, you know, we would have to say, well, hang on, dude, you know, we need to stick with that for here. But generally speaking, I mean, he owned it, and they all do. I mean, he took it where we could never dream of. Jamie Bamber, I mean, different league as well, you know. Both of those guys was like Clash of the Titans. They were so powerful and so strong, and they knew their characters so well that even on set, there was moments where the scene would finish and I wouldn't be yelling cut, because they were going off page and I just let it roll. And our sound guy, Des Keneally, who's done heaps of movies, Australian movies, probably 50 odd movies, he came up to me after one of them and he said, I've never seen that in a film. He said, you just went 15 minutes off page and those two actors were just amazing. And it was because they knew it so well, they were just going at it. And, you know, even that rivalry, I dare say, that subconscious rivalry, what was going on underneath the layer of the characters was coming through. So they really pushed one another to see how far they could go. And as I said, they knew the characters so well, it was like you or I having a standard conversation with our however many years of history behind us. It was off the planet. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of, you know, going through a standard process of working with them, talking to them, and making sure that, you know, they feel comfortable in your hands. I think that's the biggest one, is because, you know, there's, from what I've heard, I haven't experienced it myself firsthand, but, you know, from what I've heard, there's some directors that are very wishy-washy and don't really, yeah.
Black and white.
Yeah, you kind of need to know. I mean, everybody's looking at you. You got, you know, 200 people saying, well, what do we do? And you can't be like, oh, well, I don't know. And if you've got a problem, you know, what I always do is consult my heads of department and say, right, what's our options? And then you go, bam, there's our option to move forward. Because everything, as I said, is problem solving. That's what filmmaking is. It's problem solving and, you know, keeping it steering on the right channel.